Back on the Young Turks, Jake Huber, Christy Harvey with you. Now we got an in-studio guest, a fantastic guest. He's the director of movies you might recognize, Predator, Hunt for Red October, the Die Hard trilogy, and he's now the director and filmmaker behind the political prosecutions of Karl Rove. His name is John McTiernan, and he joins us in the studio now. John, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, I'd like to start with Die Hard, but I won't. And I want to start with the political prosecutions of Karl Rove. Things in here that I did not know, which I'm a little surprised by right off the bat. People tend to think, maybe they know about Siegelman and some of the more prominent cases that are on 60 Minutes, etc. First, what are the numbers behind it? You have the disparity between Democratic and Republican prosecutions under Bush. What was that?
What I started with was the Shields report. He was a college professor in St. Louis who got his students to track every announced investigation or prosecution of an elected official anywhere in the country, going back from 2002. And it turned out it was 87% Democrats. And he took this study in to the Conyers Commission, and it apparently had a lot to do with pushing a number of people over the edge to say that they were going to vote a bill of impeachment, which was just shortly before they compromised by firing Gonzalez and Rove.
Right. So from 2002 to the election in 2008, 87% of the prosecutions were of Democrats. And, of course, they would argue that's just coincidence. But how could anyone believe that? Is that the Republicans in charge, and by the way, the Republicans also way outnumbering the Democrats in that time period, but magically the Republicans wind up with less prosecution. So
what was really going on was a couple of days ago you had Karl Rove. You took a clip of Karl Rove on Fox when he was talking about, well, we can't investigate torture because we're going to be like a South American dictatorship. What he described of what was going to happen if we investigated their torturing people was exactly what they began doing.
Someone else reported it as, without a hint of irony, Karl Rove talked about, dictators with, with the tinted sunglasses, etc. So, looking at it, I fear for what might have. By the way, I should not let it pass that you saw our clip from a couple of days ago. Look at John McTiernan checking it out. So that's awesome. And so, I look at that and I think Karl Rove knows this. He knows what they did, and that's why he's scared to death of the investigations. But now we're talking about torture. Are we ever going to get to investigate what you're talking about here, the U.S. attorney scandals and their selective prosecution of Democrats? Do you think we ever get to that?
I think so. I think the torture is going to get the door open. That'll get the Leahy Commission to happen. And that's how all of this stuff will come out. And that's what people like Rove are most afraid of. It really doesn't matter if there's prosecutions. They just have to get the story out.
And so tell us a little bit more of the details of the story. Who do we have other than Siegelman that they went after?
Those are the high-profile people. Those are the people who had enough money to get lawyers and to fight. There were at least 600 elected Democrats and their state legislators, county executives, sheriffs. This stuff was all concentrated in the swing states of the Mid-South, Kentucky, North Carolina, Virginia, Tennessee, and Mississippi and Alabama.
So how do they do it, John? And we're talking to John McTiernan. His new documentary is Political Prosecutions of Karl Rove. And John, what do? Do they pull aside the U.S. attorneys and say, hey, look, this guy on a local level could hurt us one day. Let's go ahead and take him down. Is it that blatant, or is it more subtle? How do they send the signals to one another?
That's why we need the Leahy Commission. I don't know how they did it, but clearly they were talking to each other. Clearly they were targeting people. The Conyers Commission committee had the investigation about it. It was called selective prosecutions, which was a name that was forced on them by the Republicans, because the idea was, well, to use the sort of highway patrol analogy of, well, we were only stopping speeders, but some of the Republican speeders we let go. So we were maybe a little remiss that way. That was a complete lie. They started out, to follow the same metaphor, they started out with the make, model, and plate number of the person they were supposed to go charge. They would follow him until they found something they could charge him with. And if they couldn't find it, and you'll find this in dozens of cases, including what happened to even Senator Stevens, who was a quite liberal Republican. But what they do, if they couldn't find somebody, something they could charge him with, and with the federal laws, they can charge anybody with just about anything. They can find something. What they'll do is they'll grab somebody and threaten them to say that I saw him break I saw him speeding. I saw him something or other. And that's what they did to Stevens. And they did the same thing to dozens and dozens of people around the country.
All right, now, the Stevens thing, that seems... I mean, he is a solid Republican. I think going after him, if they care about politics, is probably not the way to go. So I don't know how that got into it, but obviously the prosecution there went way overboard. Holder was right to bring them.
How it got into it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why they would go
The
after
investigation
Stevens.
started right after the Shields report showed up, which threatened to blow up into a giant political thing. And
so you think they added some Republicans to go after to balance out a little bit, or
no. The news was filled with, all the way up to the last election, the news was filled with the Stevens prosecution. So it was clear, hey, we're not after Democrats. We're doing. But they picked a guy who was going to retire anyway pretty soon. They picked a guy who was a Rockefeller Republican. He's probably one of the very few members of the Senate, Republican members of the Senate, who isn't in the Federalist Society.
Mm-hmm. So these former U.S. attorneys, I assume they're former U.S. attorneys, you claim, John, are deeply, deeply corrupt. The kind of people that you go and they don't care about the American system of government and democracy. They're going to go after their political enemies and try to put them in jail, right? I mean, that's as third world dictator and tinted sunglasses as it gets. Where are they now?
It's right out of Chile under Pinochet.
So what happened to those prosecutors? Where are they now?
A lot of them are still there. A lot of them have been promoted to the federal judiciary. Noel Hillman, who was the head of and started most of these prosecutions, who was taking direction directly from Karl Rove, he was made a federal judge, and like 2 weeks later they promoted him to the Court of Appeals. I think it's like 5th District or 5th Circuit.
So
an awful lot of these people, because they went, the ones who didn't get direct payoffs, the guy who did the governor of New York, and the woman who did the case out here in California that I'm sorry, I'm spacing. The Pelicano case. Mm-hmm. They both went to Republican law firms with enormous signing bonuses. The guy who did the governor of New York got a $3.5 million bonus, joining
what do you
Robert
mean by that?
Bork's. It's a signing bonus.
So flesh that out just a little bit here as we wrap up. So Eliot Spitzer gets caught in the prostitution sting. It's more of a financial sting, etc. What do you mean?
It was really created. It was entirely created. The man, fine, visited a prostitute. He did nothing illegal. Mm-hmm. All the stuff that was published by the Post in New York, which is completely a propaganda newspaper, was all just lies. They kept saying that they were going to the grand jury with that he was using campaign funds on prostitutes and stuff. It was all made up. It was all completely made up.
So who do you think did that, and how did they get a $3.5 million signing bonus?
No, what's the name?
No,
His
you
name
don't
is
have to give me
Michael
the
Garcia.
Uh-huh.
Was he's been a Republican activist and Federalist Society member since he was in high school. He was a jack of all trades for the first 3 or 4 years in the Bush administration. They made him U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. One of the first things he did is he used the Patriot Act to send FBI squads through the personal finances of most of the major Democrats in New York. That's how he got on the fact that Spitzer had hired a prostitute.
Mm-hmm. And so he leaves the government, and who gives him the $3.5 million? Is it a law firm?
Ken Starr and Robert Bork's law firm.
Funny how that works. All right, John.
Isn't it? Yes.
John McTiernan is not only the director who did Predator, Hunt for Red October, and Die Hard, but he's now the director of the political prosecutions of Karl Rove. Everybody check it out. John, thank you so much for coming.
Thank
and we
you.
have about 20 seconds. Is there anyone who says yippee-ki-yay in this room?
No.
Okay.
No. Well, actually, I come close to it near the end.
All right. Thank you, John. Young Turks.